Okay, so I'm really passionate about STEM education and STEM in particular because I think that science is really important and vital for people to move on. It drives the country, it drives education, it drives learning, and it drives everybody to be learning all the time and to gain and to consider what they've done and to improve on things and to make sure that the world is a better place. 100 years ago, none of us had any of the technologies that we currently have, and now we couldn't be without them. And so, in order to improve education, using STEM, using technologies within it, really just supports learning. It's around making sure that you do things sort of an easier way to learn more effectively. And so if you use EdTech properly and well, then it just simplifies the whole teaching process and allows you to focus more on the learners rather than the actual activities that you're creating. The TEM end are more easily accepting, because you'll find as scientists, we're adamant about the importance of a practical experiment and investigation. So there is still very much a place for your Bunsen burners and your actual physical experiments, although in terms of technology, you can now have demonstrations and you can do them. And particularly in the pandemic, that was quite a nice way of people being able to do that. So the technology team, shall we call them? So the technology teachers, they're really accepting, and actually, why wouldn't they be? Because it's all about trying to showcase and show and use the things that they're advocating for people to go into. Maths, I personally think, is an awful lot easier with proper ed tech, because the graphs are easier to draw because you can already have it, and straight lines and the likes. So really, for STEM, yes, pretty inclusive. Scientists possibly less so, but open to the idea. That said, it's about incorporating and using effectively rather than it replacing. And I think those who are less accepting and less inclusive in terms of the technology around it are probably more afraid to use both. I really like the ViewSonic flat panels. I really like the My Viewboard software. I think quite a lot more of the software being used and explained and training within schools around using the software and that kind of thing to make it obvious of how it's useful will increase adoption. I also believe that set up demos, or at least a combination of those demos and ways of making learners be able to do those at home, particularly for possibly the A-level prescribed practicals and that kind of thing, would be advantageous, because then they can at least learn them, try them out, that kind of thing. Yeah, adoption is, most schools are currently using flat panels. Most schools are adept with using them for their PowerPoints and the like, but fewer people are using the software and actually making themselves sort of able to be peripatetic, like My Viewboard allows you to do. I really like the fact that actually I could take it to any of my devices. So I could plan my lessons at home, I could plan all the learning at home, and then I can just use it on a board. And if I'd burnt down the lab that day, I could have quite easily moved to a different room without there being a problem. And so that's quite, I think, a powerful way of using it. I also very much like the infinity canvas, so you can do some work and be doing that, and you can go off on a tangent, do your explanations, but not have lost anything, and it to be linkable. So that was quite useful to me. I would definitely advise them to be looking at how they incorporate it within their teaching and make sure that it's not just an add-on, because for a lot of years as they were coming in, we were just using them as an add-on, and there was quite a lot of people who sort of went, well, I have a PowerPoint, I'll just show it on my interactive whiteboard. And the point behind that was the word interactive, and it wasn't. So it's about planning your lessons to use the actual technology the way that it is designed to be used and make your lessons really interactive, and to hand over possibly a little bit more trust and facilitation opportunity to the learners, because actually in the teaching they do learning as well. So to really make it genuinely learner focused and more interactive than just watching the PowerPoint on the board. So you can use the things like the quizzes, um, and the voting panels and that kind of thing, and there's really quite handy. And the My View board has some software where you can have several people using it at once, and that's really useful as well. So to just take a look at what there is, to see what their learning objectives are for that lesson, and to work out how to make it as interactive as possible. And actually, almost in a way, when we used to go back to using books sometimes because that was the only way to teach certain things, because there was no practical and it was just about the theory, to find out if maybe you could do a link to some of the YouTubes or to some of the videos, and to really just include as much of the everyday technology that they have in the palm of their hand all the time in your lessons, to make them more relevant to their real world experience. I think it's definitely going down the EdTech route. I hope it's going down the STEM route, not to malign the arts, but we really, looking at the world now, technology that we use every day, all of the time, is so advanced that there is only one way it can go. And so that's worldwide. Now we have to keep going with that progress and keep doing it. Particularly, we now need to look at sort of mending some of the mistakes we've made as well. So climate change really needs some technology behind it. And if we don't learn using that technology, and the younger generation are all au fait with all of it, at the drop of a hat, whereas we're not so much. If we don't sort of pass on a love and a inclusion of technology, then it may not become part of the future research. We need to improve research, and we need to sort of move on and get it included. I know that most head teachers will say cost, and I understand that very much so. You can't ignore that. But as a sort of grassroots chalk face, I know we're not anymore, but a chalk face teacher, I would actually very much say the most important thing to me is functionality. And also, daft as it sounds, the fact that it doesn't shine in the wrong lights and that kind of thing. So I really like the My View boards because of the panel at the front where all the speakers are, so they're coming straight at you, not from the sides, and so you're getting a simple bar of sound coming through. I am yet to find a way to get it so that it can't be visible from any space in a room with too much shine on it. It's been quite nice. But actually, again, functionality. It needs to work for the rooms that it's in. It needs to work for the learners to be able to use it. So actually cleanability as well. And it needs to have the functionality simply enough for me to be able to just plug in and go, turn it on and go, and not have to do anything additional with it. It needs to be walk into a room and just start your lesson on a board that you don't have to move everyone around to be able to see, that kind of thing. I'd be saying talk to the teachers and see what they want, because actually, even though they can't probably tell you what they want per se, they can almost tell you what they don't want. And they can tell you what they don't want because of practice and activity, and actually go in and observe how they would teach a lesson. And particularly in the STEM arena, because we are practical and we are doing things that don't necessarily rely on a board as often. And so I'd be thinking about actually working with schools and finding out, and further education and higher education, all of whom want something different anyway. So the education sector is a very different beast at all levels. So the primary schools will definitely want something very cleanable, whereas secondary schools are a different thing, and they're more about visual, and higher education, they rarely get used in other than for video conferencing or lecture style. So their interactivity is lower. And actually, that's where I'd be trying to work with them to see what it is they need. But in schools, talk to the teachers, work with the teachers, find out what they actually need and want. And when they need and want it, it's probably mostly around software more than the actual physical hardware itself. It's more the software and the interactivity and the usefulness of that software and the add-ons that can occur. Girls tend to like STEM subjects at school, but are put off them when it comes to sort of choosing, making your decisions around GCSEs and A-levels, simply because they are the harder activities and they're the harder ones to do. And actually also because they can't necessarily see a way forward for the careers that they want to do. And many teachers say, do what you enjoy. And obviously physics is a hard subject, and so people are very much put off it. A lot more girls, I think, do biology than physics or chemistry. And that's because it's generally considered a sort of more sensible route through and a way to see it, whereas the physicists tend to be a little bit more abstract as a thought process. So I think there is a role for EdTech within STEM to enhance the provision and to explain almost things a little bit more clearly. Because if you think about it, the technology itself is quite an abstract thought. The fact that you can touch the screen and suddenly it does it, that in itself is quite new for those of us of an age. But if you can sort of encourage an understanding around that kind of thing, then physics becomes less mystified. And many girls who carry on with the 3 science option want to go into medicine, but actually we need to encourage them and explain that there are many careers in STEM that are not just medicine, and you don't need physics and chemistry and biology for, or maths. And they're wide-ranging and they're fascinating, and more around the sustainability agenda and more around that. And actually that's where girls have a real passion and a real belief in making the planet good. So it's about getting into their interests and ensuring that they work within that and we raise awareness. My passion is education and STEM, so it's quite. So I suppose STEM education. I'm quite happy. It's just genuinely. There's a standing joke that I've said for many years that I'm all about the learning, and so actually my passion is entirely STEM education and improving and enhancing and helping people to be the best they can be, which will then improve the planet in the long run.